Tell me if this sounds familiar. You enter a trade in a specific area only to realize that it has hit your stop loss, only to then proceed in your direction. I think with this, the issue is not so much the direction, but more so your timing and understanding of one key element. What we will be discussing today is liquidity, how to understand liquidity, and what is the importance of it in relation to your trade. Like, subscribe, let's get this thing started. Liquidity. What is liquidity? Google's definition of liquidity is the availability of liquid assets to a market or company. That being said, my opinion of liquidity is any area in which there is a massive amount of traders who are buying or selling, taking profit, entering, exiting, using buy stops, sell stops, or buy limits or sell limits, and etc. The idea behind these areas is that price will almost always return to these areas because it is in these areas where the market gets its energy. We have to understand how the dealer, which is the person who owns the market, controls these areas and your perception of these areas. We want to understand the pain points. What do we mean by the pain points? We want to understand who is frustrated that their trade isn't going according to plan, who's entered in these areas and is actually holding a loss right now, who's battling with drawdown right now. Look for where the masses might have been duped into thinking that it was going to buy, that actually sold, forcing them to become trapped. And you'll find your liquidity. Think back to when this last happened to you, how it made you feel. It is likely that you got trapped in a liquidity zone. Upon trying to understand this, you will quickly realize that the market is just a big picture of who's trapped and who's taking advantage of said trap. Reactions. Google's definition of a reaction is something done, felt, or thought in response to a situation or event. We then get to understand that a reaction to these areas are actually very important because the reaction of these areas symbolizes what is happening at that area. The dealer will most times have a reaction around these liquidity areas to grab excess liquidity from those trapped there in the opposite direction. Also, anyone who's trapped there and smart enough to get out with a small loss or break even will. Those who are not smart enough to get out due to a lack of understanding or reasoning, the reaction will continue to be trapped repeatedly. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. Identifying liquidity. How do you identify liquidity? It is actually a lot simpler than you think. It's more so to do with understanding where traders are entering, where their stop losses are, and where they might be closing their trades than anything. It comes back to what we spoke about earlier concerning the pain traders face. If you can understand where these traders are entering, exiting, or having their stop losses hit, you can probably, with a really good chance, say that that area is a liquidity zone. This can be identified on the chart by a lot of price action in one area. For this, you can use candlesticks, bars, the line graph, Ichimoku, Renko, and just about anything. The main thing that you should look for is big clusters of action. The bigger and more active this zone gets, the more liquidity it is safe to assume is in that area. This typically means that the move that can occur off of that area has high potential to be greater, using or distribution of liquidity. The dealer will always move liquidity from areas of high liquidity to low liquidity. Just like water always flows from high to low pressure, my opinion is that the market follows suit, and this is because it equalizes the pressure between the buyers and the sellers, which allows the dealer to maintain control. Now, we've said before that liquidity is what moves the market, but why? Liquidity is the lifeblood of the market. Have you ever heard someone mention that they have to liquidate their assets? This is because they're not liquid cash. Remember the definition of liquidity? They're not liquid. They don't have the available cash to make the moves that they want. So they need to build up that liquidity from a high area of liquidity to then distribute it to the lower areas or where it is needed. The direction. It is very important that you pay close attention to the overall direction of the market, because liquidity is not just in specific areas. Liquidity is the market itself. I want to paint a picture for you right now. Let us say you go on a higher time frame and realize that the overall move is bullish. And then within the last 3 to 5 months, you realize that the market has gone bearish. It is then reasonable to assume that that bear move is an induction to have traders inject more liquidity into the market. Think about this. There will be traders who are interested in more buys above the high and are now trapped. The dealer will also trap traders in sells, getting them to sell. And the high is an area of high liquidity. And by it moving to an area down low and going bearish, it is now moving to an area of low liquidity via distribution. Once enough liquidity is distributed in the bearish direction, it then has all it needs to proceed back to the high due to the bear move being a liquidity accumulation in and of itself. Think, wouldn't many traders be going against the overall direction in the bear move? That bear move is a buildup of high liquidity in and of itself. And now, the high is the low liquidity. Now it's time for price to make its move back towards the high, which is the low liquidity. Gaps. I've seen someone make a video discussing gaps, and he said that gaps are where there's a lack of liquidity. And that is partially true, but my explanation of a gap has more to do with a disruption of the market itself in terms of the data. We both know, you and I listening to this, that the market never stops. It can't. Because real currency exchanges are always happening, it's always occurring. We as traders are simply restricted access to place trades or see the movement over the course of the weekend. But rest assured, it never stops. What you would find most times is on the market close and on the market open, which is Friday. Between those 2 points, the market can open on Sunday, Monday with a gap. This is not due to just a lack of liquidity, but it also has to do with the fact that the market has been moving throughout the course of the weekend. And this is obviously my assumption, and I think it makes sense. But I think that because the market has been moving, but we're not allowed to see that movement, the gap is created to insinuate this. This will also be an area of low liquidity, and that is why price will eventually try to get back there to distribute that liquidity it has gathered after the fact by filling the gap. Whipsaws. You will realize at certain times, during certain news events, and sometimes literally for no reason at all, random big candles with gigantic wicks on both sides are created. This is known as a whipsaw. The purpose of a whipsaw is to clear the board of both buyers and sellers at this point in time so that the dealer can grab as much liquidity from both sides as possible. The reason for doing this, in my opinion, is so that the dealer can start fresh and get rid of everybody so no one is able to keep track of what has been going on. This, again, equalizes the pressure in a way, and at the same time confuses the masses so that they lose their bearings and not know what to do next. Reversals. While it is reasonable to assume that reversals occur quite frequently, I need you to understand that they are a very rare occurrence. And the reason for that is just like with the law of inertia, the law that states that objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and while objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless an external force is acted upon them. The market is very, very similar. It takes quite a bit of resources, in my opinion, to reverse the market against its current direction. You have to remember that in order for a market that's been going bearish to reverse against the bears, the dealer not only needs to go against those bears, but he needs to get high amounts of liquidity at the downside so he can distribute it back to the top where there's a lower amount of liquidity. This is why most times what you thought was a reversal will oftentimes just be a small pullback. It is very easy for you to mistake a reversal for continuation. So my advice is to learn what the pattern looks like and where to find it. Stop hunts. Stop hunts are designed to take a large amount of liquidity from a predetermined area, oftentimes above a high or a low, but can appear just about anywhere. A stop hunt isn't targeting your stop loss in particular. It is, however, targeting an area in which there are large amounts of traders' stop losses. So if you get stopped out due to a stop hunt, it is very likely that you were thinking like the masses. Using this information, it is wise to try to not take trades where everyone else is taking trades, or place your stop loss where everyone else is placing their stop loss. because you'll just be grouped into where everybody else is being stopped out. A liquidity grab. A liquidity grab is similar to a stop hunt in that its move usually occurs very quickly. However, it is oftentimes accompanied with the overall direction of the market. So, if the market is going bullish, we typically find that price will try to grab liquidity from downside before continuing bullish. Now, if you understand this method and the reasoning behind why it occurs, you'll quickly begin to realize that the best time to get into your trade is after price has already grabbed its liquidity. That being said, if you can achieve this effectively and consistently, you'll be very surprised as well of how quickly your trades can go into profit and stay in profit. Entry techniques using liquidity. You have a multitude of ways that you can enter the market using liquidity zones. Areas of induction would be the best place to begin looking for an entry once price has shifted momentum back into your favor. I would tend to try to use inverse candles such as this to try to fuel my entry. The reason for that is even though we know that we should buy low and sell high, we shouldn't take that at face value. At its absolute core, yes, we should try to buy low and sell high, but not at the low or high of the chart per se, because who knows where those lows or highs really are going to occur. What about if we were to use that in terms of, or in relation to, the candles themselves, as opposed to the actual chart? You will quickly find that buying sell candles and selling buy candles is actually very powerful if you can get it right. If you like this video, definitely leave me a like. It sure does help me a lot. And subscribe if you'd like to see more episodes like this. Also comment below if you appreciate these tips in this new style of video that I'm producing. It'll definitely let me know that you'd like to get more tips like this. See you guys very, very soon.